Hey nerds, Todd Simmons coming back at you with a little more Toddomation. This is the last video in the ACL series that I started specifically for the Meraki dashboard. This one is specific to your wireless SSiDs. This one was a little different because the ACLs are on a per SSiD basis, and you can have up to 16 SSiDs. Well, I didn't want to create a page for each individual SSiD. That just seemed a little unintuitive. So this one took me a little while, but I think you're going to like it because it allows you to create one page or one tab in your Excel workbook and then specify the different SSiDs and then provide the ACL for each one of those. So let's jump right into it. As you can see, I'm already in my Meraki dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the network. East Network 1, this is the network that all the ACL and firewall rule videos have been done in. Now I'm going to go over to wireless. And from wireless, we're going to go to firewall and traffic shaping. And you can see it defaults to the very first SSiD that you have. So you can see all of your SSiDs by hitting the down arrow here. And as you can see, we can have up to 15. I'm only showing 3, but it doesn't really matter. One thing that I do want to call out is you have to know what SSiD number you're working with and why this might say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down to 15. That is not how the API counts it. The API starts at 0 and not 1. So when you're working with ACLs and you're automating that process, you have to remember that it might be SSiD number 3 here, but in the API, it would be SSiD number 2 because it starts at 0. It's a little confusing on how they did that, but you know, as developers, we're used to starting with 0. It's just the dashboard inside the GUI starts at 1. So let's look at the spreadsheet that I created. If you've watched any of these videos, you'll know that this first line is our headers up on the top, and those headers are how we're going to create the keys for the dictionaries in Python. And then the Meraki will actually take that dictionary, list of dictionaries, and turn it into JSON before it makes a change. So let's go through it. As I said, I've created the headers. The SSiD header is actually the number, the SSiD number. And like I said, it starts at 0 and goes all the way through. So I've done 0, 1, 2, and 3 here. And what I want to show you is even though I don't have 4 SSiDs configured, that doesn't mean that you can't write ACLs for items that aren't configured yet. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Very important. These don't have to come in a row, actually, but they should. As we go through, we're going to look. And when we look at the ACLs and when the code goes through here, it's going to group all of these based on this number. Okay, that way all the zeros are together, all the SSiD ones are together, and then we're going to send them individually to the Meraki dashboard. Okay, so make sure that you have that set. Also, this allow LAN access. If you want to allow LAN access, and we're doing this for a particular SSiD, you must have something in here for each one of those lines. It was the best way that I could come with to figure to work. Now I put true here. I turn this into a Boolean. So if you don't want it here, do not put false, because this is just a string value. So what that means is inside the code, when it looks, if it sees a value, it's going to consider it true. If it sees no value, it's going to consider it false. That's how Booleans work. So even though I put true here for SSiD number 1, which is SSiD number 2 inside the actual dashboard, it will turn that on. But here's the weird thing. If I put false here, it's going to turn it on as well because it's just a string. It's looking for a value. So remember that when you're actually working with your SSiDs. The rest of this is very simple compared to the other ones. It has validation, so it tells you what you can put in each one of these items as far as the value. except when we get to the CIDR, the source port, the destination CIDR, the destination port, or any of the VLAN information. There's no way to validate that at this particular time. So just make sure that you have the information in there right. Don't change the headers, because the headers are all exactly the way that Meraki wants to see it. So if I look here, we can see that there's no ACLs really on my first one. Here's my second one. Once again, there's no ACLs on it. I go to my third one. There's no ACLs in it. I go to my fourth one that's not even configured, and there's no ACLs in that one either. Okay, so let's just go back to the first one. Okay, and let's jump into the code. So looking at the code, I wrote this update wireless ACLs. And looking at it, just like the other videos, right, if you want to use the Python decouple method, using that Python decouple method allows you to hide these particular variables inside a .env file. I've got a video for that if you're interested in learning more about those. I am specifying the network ID here just because we're looking at a single network at this particular point. And I will call out that the network ID is also the same name as the Excel spreadsheet. And I think that's real important. That way you can keep a spreadsheet per network and you have all of your ACLs in that one individual spreadsheet. There's obviously some other ways that you could do it by one large spreadsheet with a bunch of information inside the worksheets. I just thought this was cleaner to have one per, but know that this network ID is going to be sent through in order to determine the name or the spreadsheet to open at this particular point. If you do not want to use the Python decouple method, you can put your API key and your org key here and just go ahead and comment out these particular lines. I like to use the .env files, especially when making these videos. You know, that way I don't have to keep deleting all my API keys. Next thing is this dashboard. This dashboard is just a link to the Meraki package that needed to be installed, the Python package that actually makes the connection. So this makes that connection for us. Next is this wireless ACLs. This is the return from using this particular method, and you'll see that this method, this ACL, is being referred to as the import Meraki wireless ACLs, and I do that as ACL. And then I run this get rules method, and I pass along my network ID. So let's look at that just real quick. So we're going to jump into that particular file. So here's my Meraki wireless ACLs. Once again, if you've watched any of these videos, it's very well documented how to use Excel and Python with Meraki dashboard. If you haven't seen the deep dive video on this, I'll put a link to it in this video for you. Notice that as I send over this network ID, I use the F method to pull the network ID with the .xlsx, which opens up this particular file over here. That way it's not a static rule at this particular point or a static entry, and you're having to change that every single time. We're going to take all of this data and we're going to put it in a list called wireless, and then we're going to return that list. So what this does in short is it's going to look at this Excel spreadsheet over here, and it's going to take the information for each line and create a dictionary for each line, and then that line is then added, or that dictionary is then added in this statement here to that particular list. So it's just going to use a for loop until it goes to every single line. It then returns all of those lines from as wireless. And as you can see inside the original method, we're actually calling what it returns for us there, wireless ACLs here. So let's just look real quick at the data that gets returned. So I'm just going to do an IC, which is ice cream. If you're not familiar with ice cream, I love ice cream. No, that sounds a little bit weird. They probably thought about it that way. But it allows you to get a better idea of what it is that your data looks like. It creates the variable names and kind of shows everything in a much better way, in my opinion, than just the print statement or more specifically the pretty print as well. So let's just go ahead and let's go get this data and then let's print it to the screen so you can see what it looks like. So when I run it, here it comes. As you can see, ice cream comes out. It's very long. I've got 12 lines over there, which means it created 12 dictionaries, and it nested those dictionaries in a single list. So you can see using ice cream, the name of the variable is wireless ACLs. It's one of the reasons I love ice cream. If you're printing a bunch of different stuff, it always tells you that variable name. And then obviously it's a list. There's the bracket, and then our curly brace shows all of our actual values. So notice this allow LAN access says none on this particular SSID, but then when we go down here before, this says true. And true doesn't mean true. True just means that it has a value something other than none. Like I said, if I would have put false in there, it would have turned it on. So don't let that catch you, okay? So there's the data we can see. We're going to the Excel spreadsheet. We're pulling all of the data out of that Excel spreadsheet. We're nesting those dictionaries into a single list, and then we just printed out that list. Let me clear this up just to make it a little easier to see. I'm going to remove these 2 lines that I just created. Okay. So after that, I create a list called SSID count. This is really important because what I had to do was understand how many SSIDs we're doing the configuration for. Okay. So when I go look at that, I take the SSID number, okay, as the line from SSID, right? So what I'm doing is saying, hey, each time we go through this, with the SSID, go ahead and put that inside this variable as an integer, which is important because when you send this up to Meraki, they expect that to be an actual integer, not a string. Okay, so then I have this SSID count, which is the list that I just created, and I'm adding that particular number. Okay, so now I go through this particular Excel document, and all of these numbers that you see me highlighting over here are put in that sheet. Okay, so I've got 12 lines. That means right now this SSID count list will have 12 entries in it. Well, I don't want all 12 entries. I want it to actually have only the entries that are unique. So I have a bunch of duplicates when I look at this SSID count list. So the next thing that I do is I create a new list using the list function and then applying the set method to that SSID count. So what that's going to do is 2 things. It's going to remove all the duplicates from that list, and it's going to order them from 0 to whatever is the last number. Really important as I start going through things because that's how I'm going to create each of the ACLs for each of the SSIDs. Once that's created, I can then run a for loop. Now remember, this SSID piece here, that's just a variable, okay? And that's what I'm calling each line in SSIDs. Now I'm creating a new list called rules. And for each one of the lines, so I'm going to do a nested for loop inside that wireless ACL, and I'm looking to see what the value is of that line, and then I'm appending that line to this rules list that I created inside the loop, which is important to remember because every time this loop starts over, that list is going to get repopulated. Okay. Then I look specifically for this allow LAN access over here, right, that I've highlighted here. I'm looking, saying, is there a value there? That's what this bool is going to do. It's if that key, allow LAN access, has a value, any value other than none, it's going to consider it to be true, and then this LAN access variable is considered true. Okay, so I've gone through each of these lines. I've determined which lines are for SSID 0 through, you can have a total of 15. I don't have 15 on mine. I only have 4, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. And inside this loop, now I have to run my Python code that I created because I now have 0 and then SSID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 lined up inside that single list. So using this dashboard.wireless, so this is where I'm actually calling the API using this Meraki package. I'm bringing up the wireless and I'm doing the update network wireless SSID firewall layer 3 firewall rules. That's how it calls its ACLs. Not sure why they use that name. Obviously, it is inside the firewall section, but they call it firewall rules instead of ACL. So if you've watched all of these videos, you might notice, wow, they're really calling things different in different areas. I think what happened, quite frankly, is you just had different development teams using different variables for things, so they don't always match. So, make sure that you understand what it's asking for very specifically. So here's what we're going to send with it. These are all requirements. We're going to send the network ID, right? That's the network that we're working on. The number, which is very important. It expects to see number. This number tells us, is it the first SSID? Is it the last SSID on your list? And remember, the number here, you +1 to see it inside the actual GUI. Okay, and then the rules, well, these are the rules. This is actually the each of the lines that we're specifying. So this rules is going to be a nested, it's going to be dictionaries nested inside of that individual list. And then the allow LAN access option. If it's false, it turns it off. If it's true, it then turns it on. Okay, so that's the code. At this particular point, we're ready to run and see what happens. So let's go ahead and run the code. And this one takes a little longer because it's got to go through some nested loops. So you see it took a few seconds. If I come in here and I look and I'm on Memphis, there's nothing here right now. Now, remember, Memphis is my first one. Okay, so that would have been this line 0. So I should now have 2 ACLs, or inside the ACL, I should have 2 lines. And the allow LAN access should be turned off. And as you can see right now, it's already turned off. So if I refresh this page, I'm still on Memphis. Well, there's my two lines, right? It wrote, and my deny is still off. Well, going back and looking at my spreadsheet, now, I can see that my next ACL had 3 entries, or my next SSID had 3 entries, and now I actually turned this on, the allow LAN access. So the LAN, the Wi-Fi or wireless devices on this network, and only this network, can actually access the LAN. So let's look at it. So I go from Memphis. My second one is Phoenix. So I look at Phoenix. There it is. Look, my allow LAN access is now on. Okay, and here's my 3 entries inside my ACL. Let's look at the next one. And then here's the Toddomation. This one also had 3. We're back to the deny on the allow LAN access, which if we look at the spreadsheet on number 2, right, we did not allow it. So now I've done SSID 1, 2, and 3, which in the worksheet is 0, 1, and 2 because there's a mismatch. So now I've got this number 3. Well, number 3 is actually number 4. And if we look in my SSIDs here, you can see 4 is not configured. Okay, so there's nothing there. But if I go and I look at my, wrong one. If I go to wireless and I go back to firewall and traffic shaping, and if I go to SSID 4, it created the ACL. So these SSIDs, even though they're not on, you can configure every SSID or every placeholder for every SSID using this automation without actually turning it on. So this one is off, right? It says unconfigured up here at the top. You see it, right? It says unconfigured, but it allowed us to turn on the ACLs or the ACLs for this one. So let's do what I'd like to do. Let's make a change now. So remember, when you make a change, inside your Excel worksheet, and then you just update that to the Meraki dashboard. You can't make an add here, an add there, right? The way that you can, just like adding one line in the Meraki dashboard. Here, it's an all or nothing kind of a deal. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this one that's not even created, and I'm going to say false here. Okay, and I'm going to save that. So allow LAN access now says false. Now remember, this is a trick. I wish it wasn't this way, but it's a Boolean. As long as there's something in there, it's going to consider it true, regardless if it says false or not. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to run my code again. So this is going to rewrite all of the ACLs that I have in here. Even though I didn't make a change to the other one, it still rewrites them. When I come back and I look here, I'm going to go ahead and refresh this page. Now you see the only change that I made should be for this line right here. This should actually be a permit statement if the code's working correctly. So I'm going to refresh that page, and there it is. It's now an allow, not a permit, but an allow. So it turned it on just by using any character in here, even when it says false. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that because I don't want that to be that way. And I'm going to run my code one more time. And then I'm going to refresh this page. And it's back to deny. Well, that's it. That shows you how to use the ACLs inside the wireless piece, specifically the wireless SSiDs that you have inside the Meraki dashboard. One worksheet can control all of the ACLs that you want for all of your WLANs, and you can even create ACLs for WLANs that aren't there yet. Not sure if you would want to do that or not, but I did want to show you because those are already numbered, and there's a limit to them inside the Meraki dashboard that you can create stuff for the SSiDs even though they're not active. And once again, we can do all of our ACLs for all of our SSiDs with just one worksheet. So like, subscribe, really appreciate all the support. If you have questions, let me know. Throw them in the comments. I'll get back to you. And until next time, we'll talk to y'all later, nerds. Bye.